Good evening, everyone. I'm Mehak Rathi, and I welcome you all to today's webinar. The guest for the webinar is Mr. Sushil Kumar Jain. Sir is a senior advocate practicing in Supreme Court, and Sir has been exclusively practicing in the Supreme Court for last more than 45 years, and Sir has conducted more than 15,000 cases in Supreme Court. Sir has been former president, Supreme Court Advocate on Record Association, and also been member, Governing Council, Indian Law Institute, New Delhi. The list of landmark judgments in which Sir has appeared is quite long, but to name a few, Sir has appeared in Ram Janmbhoomi Ayodhya matter for Nirmohi Akhada, Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab, TMA Pai Foundation versus State of Karnataka, Narmada Bachao Andolan versus Union of India, validity of Section 499 IPC defamation case, MC Mehta versus Union of India, Ganga River pollution case, and the list is endless. The topic for today's webinar, that is evidentiary value of police officer, no presumption under 114 Evidence Act, is rather a topic that needs discussion. And we think Sir is the best person to enlighten us on the same. Sir, it is indeed our honor to have you here with us today, and I'm sure it will be a great learning experience for all the participants. I welcome you on behalf of my entire team.
Not getting my voice?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
I'm thankful to all entities and particularly to Mehak and Arshid to give me opportunity to interact with you all of you. Friends, colleagues, and my dear students. You are well aware, in most of the cases in the special laws, you find the evidence of the police officer, narcotics officer, or in CBI, again the police officer, enforcement directorate, all these officers are basically, but that question is definitely pending consideration. But that's a very important subject. What is the evidentiary value of a police officer's statement? So most of these cases, people are convicted only on the statement, recovery and statement. You know, life and liberty is one of the cherished freedom given to us by our forefathers under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, and is one of the basic features of the Constitution. The role of police officer comes in to maintain law and order and to provide life and liberty. And for that purpose, The police officer is responsible both for law and order and also for investigation. Investigation, fair investigation is an important subject, and it is one of the basic right given to our citizens through Article 20 and 21. For investigation, one needs wide powers. The police, being in charge of investigation, has been given wide powers, not only after constitute our independence, even before that, by the British government. The police has a vast, unadulterated anti. You know, the powers of the police are almost absolute. Once the person has absolute powers, there is every chance of misuse. And it is being misused. There are historical data available, historical background available for that purpose. You know, the police officer, sometimes for extraneous considerations, like extortion of money, political pressure, get gallantry award, take out of term promotions, they involve in misusing these powers. The Supreme Court in R.P. Kapoor's case has held the duty of investigating officer is to bring out the real unvarnished truth and not to bluster a prosecution case with such false evidence as may enable the court to record conviction. The absolute conviction so conferred on the police officer is double-edged sword. On the one hand, you will find it is most necessary for the investigation of the matter. But at the same time, it is misused, and I told, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In this regard, the Law Commission of India, in 177th report, has observed, I quote, the scope of corruption and connected malpractices arises at several stages in the day-to-day working of the police. Starting from the regular registering of a case, for arresting or not arresting, for extortion, for interfering in civil disputes, for fabricating false evidence, for collecting hafta, for businessmen, and so on. The power of arrest is the most important source of an extortion by a police officer. You know, in this Bombay Hawkers case, there was open admission that about 10 to 15,000 crores of rupees bribe is given by the hawkers in Bombay. This is the extent of bribe being given in these days by the small persons. The police officers in such an officer who are entrusted to the task of law enforcement, however, they take recourse to third-degree methods for this purpose. And for this reason, this fact has been even found correct by none else than the National Police Commission in its report, first report in the year 1978 to 81. As back in 1978 to 81. And in the report itself, it is mentioned, I again quote, police are frequently criticized for their use of third-degree methods during investigation by examining suspected or accused. Police brutality in their handling suspect is referred in some context or the other in the literature on police forces in several countries of the world, and the Indian police is no exception. Interrogation of a person, whether he be or witness or a suspect or accused, is a difficult and this delicate exercise for any police officer and call for enormous patience and considerable understanding of human psychology. Unfortunately, several police officers, under pressure of work and driven by desire to achieve quick results, leave the path of patience and scientific interrogation and escort to use of the force in different form to pressure the witness, suspect, accused to disclose all the facts known to him. While law recognizes the need for use of force by the police in the discharge of their duties on some specific occasion, like the dispersal of a violent move, the arrest of violent bad character to resist the arrest, etc. So this is the question. I need not need further. You see that in our police, in our country, they are not adopting scientific methods and is still going on with the old methods of arresting the accused, extracting confession, extracting evidence, and then fabricating evidence. It's a thing that still continues. So, Honorable Supreme Court took note of this fact. In Joginder Kumar versus State of UP, placed reliance on the aforesaid National Police Commission report and observed. That report which says that this is not the strongest term that they even police commissioner they condemned the action or activities of police that has been noticed by Supreme Court by observing the National Police Commission in its third report referring to the quality of arrest by the police in India mentioned power of arrest as one of the chief sources of corruption in the police. Right. The 60% of the arrests are either unnecessary and unjustified. Similarly, the 43.2% of the expenditure in jail is because of this unnecessary arrest. This is the enormity the police is using their powers. So, therefore, to have this investigation, if they will go on the scientific investigation, they can reduce the unnecessary harassment. This you will find that this is not the present juncture it is happening. It is happening time memorial. You know, in 1833, the then government of India, for the first time in the history, appointed the first commission of India in the leadership of Lord Macaulay. The reference to the committee was to consider the reforms of the judicial establishment, judicial procedure, and laws of India. It gave its report in 1837-38. In its first report, on page 110, in the chapter Examination of Parties and Evidence, this is the chapter. As part of the proposed code of procedure for the courts of the criminal judicature in Bengal and observed, is interesting. Then follows other provisions for preventing, then follows other provisions for preventing any species of compulsion or maltreatment. A view to exhort a confession or procedure information, but we are informed, and this information is corroborated by the evidence we have examined. They have also examined the evidence at that stage in 1833. Almost about 175 years back, rather more than that. And in spite of this qualification, as to the character of the confession, confessions are frequently extorted and fabricated. In that report, it was noticed that in a dacoity case, when the police find the dacoit is not available, they involve some innocent person. That's confession, which leads the dacoit that he can go scot-free. So real culprits goes scot-free, and the poor person who is innocent, he faced the trial and ultimately faced the punishment of. This was the condition at that time, and which is prevailing now also. So ultimately, in the report, it was specifically mentioned, that is very important. We are persuaded that any provision to correct the exercise of this power by the police will be futile. And we accordingly propose to remedy the evil as far as possible by the adoption of a rule prohibiting any examination, whatever of an accused party by the police, the result of which is to constitute a written document. Means because the record statements and that will be treated as document. So that document they can't allow. So in this background, the commission gave its recommendation, and on the basis of those recommendations, Section 145, making a statement made before the police officer as inadmissible. Section 147 prohibits police to record any statement or confession. 148, which made confessions or admission of guilt to police officer inadmissible. Section 149, which states the confession or admission of guilt while a person is in custody of a police officer is inadmissible unless made in the immediate presence of the state. That is confession. And Section 150, which related to discoveries, were incorporated and enacted in the first Criminal Procedure Code 1861. So, on the basis of the law report submitted by Lord Macaulay team in 1838, in pursuance of appointment in 1833, this Criminal Procedure Code was enacted and these provisions were specifically mentioned. Thereafter, Evidence Act team, on the basis of the same report, the Evidence Act, which came into force in 1872, was enacted in 1872 and is still in force. In that, these provisions, which I mentioned, which were taken in the code 1861, were verbatim lifted from that place. And they were made section 25, 26, and 27 of the Evidence Act. This is the history behind 25, 26, and 27 of the Evidence Act. Stiffest, his introduction to the Evidence Act states at page 171. I may observe upon the provision relating to them, section 25, 26, and 27 were transferred to Evidence Act. Verbatim from the Code of Criminal Procedure Act 25 of 1861. They differ widely from the law of England and were inserted in the Act of 1861 in order to prevent the practice of torture by the police for the purpose of extracting confession from persons in their custody. You will find in Britain, notice here, in Britain, there is no such tough law. But they say because of the Indian conditions, they specifically mention that these provisions were specifically brought into Evidence Act 5, 26, and 27. And therefore, the evidence collected by the police or confession made by the police before a police officer is not even admissible even in the civil matters. Because Evidence Act is applicable to all. 27 is only for the accused. But so far as this confession part is concerned, that is it has been brought in the evidence. In Queen Emperor versus Babula, it was held by Allahabad High Court. Those days, Allahabad High Court, Presidency Town High Court, were on the great demand. The legislature had view of the malpractices of the police officer extorting confession from accused person in order to gain credit by securing conviction, and those malpractices went to the length of positive torture. Nor do I doubt the legislature in laying down such stringent rules regarded the evidence of police officer as untrustworthy, and the object of the rules was to put a stop to the extortion of confession by taking away the police officer as the advantage of proving such extorted confession during the trial of a. This was the object, that they made difference from British law to Indian law. In addition to the above Criminal Procedure Code 1861, legislature also made similar provision in Criminal Procedure Code. 145 was equivalent to 161, 162 CRPC. The said provision continued in up to 1872 CRPC, 1885 CRPC, 119, 121. This was followed in Criminal Procedure Code in 1898 at 161, 162 CRPC, and again section 161, 162 CRPC in the new Procedure Code. There is one more section. Section 145 of the Indian Evidence Act only permits part of the said statement to be used only for contradicting the witness, but not more than that. It is not admissible to that extent, but it is only used for the contradiction of the witness. To that extent, it is being used. Now, the same thing continued after independence also. 1947, we got independence. The Evidence Act is continuing. Then first Criminal Procedure Code continued, and thereafter the new Criminal Procedure Code also took over the same 161, 162, 163, 164 CRPC in it. Now, this is the historical background of this section. In this background, this investigation, what is happening now, this is important. And this fact is noticed by the Supreme Court in a series of judgments of the custodial death and other things. Rather, in the case of Premchand, the police used to take help of a strong witness. They have taken advantage of more than 300 times of that very witness. And they were noticed by the court. And even after this direction, the police did not stop. So in that contest, in Premchand's case, 1981 Supreme Court, the Supreme Court directed free the process of investigation and prosecution for the contamination of concoction through the expediency of stockpiling of stock witnesses. This is the situation. Thereafter, Supreme Court commented, Punjab and Haryana High Court commented in Darshan Singh's case with regard to false implication with the help of Sarpanchar. Then, in Amos Shamsuddin's case, the court directed to scrutinize the evidence of police officer and needs corroboration. Thereafter, therefore, you will find that this is the scheme of the Act continuously from 1861 onwards is that the police officer's evidence is not that trustworthy. That can't be treated as trustworthy. At least it needs corroboration. The Law Commission of India, in its 185th report, noticed this fact again. 184th report is a recent one. In the last three decades, as revealed from the media and innumerable law reports of the Supreme Court and High Court, police conduct appears to have deteriorated. This is very important, deteriorated, rather than improving from what it was years ago. The Law Commission, in its 113th report, recommended even incorporation of 114 capital D, will give the presumption against the police officer that he might have committed murder if the person died in custodial death. And under that background, 100B was incorporated by the Parliament in our Evidence Act. Therefore, this fact is noticed in the state of UP versus Ram Sagar Yadav. And therefore, since misuse of power of corruption in the police system is one form or the other, has always existed, and the government, in spite of direction by the Honorable Court, did not take any effort. Therefore, in Kishore Singh versus State of Rajasthan, in another judgment in 1981, Supreme Court 1597, the Supreme Court showed the deep concern regarding the police atrocities in the following terms. I quote: no police lifestyle is relying more on the fist than the wits, and torture more than a culture can control crime because it means hammering on ends and refute the vice which it seeks to extinguish. Secondly, the state must re-educate the constabulary out of their sadistic arts, inculcate a respect for the human person, a process which must begin more by example than by perceiving of the law are really to emulate. Nothing is more cowardly than a person in police custody being beaten up, and nothing inflicts a greater wound of our constitutional culture than a state official running person regardless of human rights. Similarly, the Supreme Court further noticed this fact in Munshi Singh Gautam versus State of Madhya Pradesh, and it was mentioned dehumanizing torture, assault, death in custody, which have assumed alarming proportions, raise serious questions about the credibility of the rule of law and the administration of criminal justice system. The concern which was shown in Raghuveer Singh case more than 2 decades back seems to have fallen on deaf ears. This is the observation of the Supreme Court. And the situation does not seem to be showing any noticeable change. The anguish expressed in Gauri Shankar Sharma versus State of UP, Bhagwan Singh versus State of Punjab, and various judgments from the Supreme Court does not seem even to have caused any softening of attitude in the inhuman approach in dealing with persons in custody. In Gauri Shankar, which I mentioned about, was noticed about, the High Court should have realized that cases are not unknown where police officers have given inaccurate accounts to secure a conviction or to help out a colleague from a tight situation of his creation. Recently, I done a matter where a person made a report to the CBI that such and such officer of the narcotics department is sick, asking bribe. The person was trapped. Once the person was trapped and challan was filed and his trial was about to start, at that stage, these persons against who were witnesses in the first matter and who lodged the complaint, in front of that very person, because their telephone numbers have the all details, connect their presence and their exchange of exchange of their 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 views which they wanted to misdeeds were specifically noticed, and just to pressurize them, another case was made, and the person remained in 3 years for jail, and ultimately Supreme Court granted him bail. This is the situation that these persons misuse their powers. Even in the villages, nobody can dare to file a complaint against the narcotic officer. This is the situation. Therefore, in this situation, this is in Bhagwan Singh versus State of Punjab. Again, this the Supreme Court said it is a pity that some of the police officers, as happened in this case, have not shared such method even in the modern age. Must adopt some scientific method and resorting to physical torture. The custodians of the law themselves, these are the inners in committing crime, then no member of the society is safe and secure if the police officer who have to provide security and protection to the citizen indulge in such methods, they are creating a sense of insecurity in the minds of citizens, more heinous than a gamekeeper becoming a poacher. That is how the various judgments are there in Nilpati Behra's case, then Prakash Singh's case. In Prakash Singh, the Supreme Court observed further wait for government to take suitable steps for police reform and would issue appropriate direction for the immediate compliance. Guiding the government to these directions until they frame appropriate decision for the same. Even after number of observations when the government did not act, the court has to take this much action. To this extent, the Supreme Court has gone. The court thus delivered a notable judgment in Prachar Prakash Singh, where it instructed the central and state government to act in accordance with a set of 7 directives which lay down practical mechanism to initiate these reforms. But the government did not act. Ultimately, the Supreme Court reacted. Therefore, the criminal justice system, in particular the police, have remained unchanged for the last 140 years. There has been no difference in the behavioral aspect of police personnel. Either police personnel still indulges in the corrupt practice and notorious dealings. At the present time, they have attained the art of bribery and influence. They have, instead of combating crime and its perpetrators, decided to join them, which is more profitable and less. There are numerous provisions in the Constitution of India, along with the law. Most of these provisions are not implemented in a democracy governed by the rule of law. Such invisibility can have serious repercussions on the liberties of citizens, civil society, and can further lead to a huge trust deficit in the judgment. Therefore, the judgments of the Supreme Court have been rendered without such an aspect as discussed above and required. Now the question, what is happening? In spite of all this background, in the judgment like Tahir Ali or Kripal Singh, the Supreme Court said that the police officer evidence is sufficient for recording conviction. They go to the extent in some of the cases that they are even entitled equal position as that of the other officials required under 140 or the presumption also. In that, those judgments, you notice, is very important. The scheme of Evidence Act, the scheme of Criminal Procedure Code is very clear that 25, 26, 27 of the Evidence Act prohibits statement before the police officer or a confession police officer is inadmissible. 161, 162 ARPC, any statement recorded by the police officer is not admissible in evidence. And 145 is only evidence, it can be used or device, it can be statement, can be used only for contradiction, nothing more than that. It is not an evidence. If this is scheme of the act, how can an officer, another officer can be treated equal to the police officer? So therefore, they can't be covered under section 114 of the Evidence Act. There can't be any presumption in their favor. Similarly, when the Supreme Court in 1959, as back as 59, has clearly held, though in the judgment before that, it was even held that they are participants. They are just like accomplices in the bribery matter. The Supreme Court said at least they are interested witnesses. If they are interested witnesses, and under the scheme of the court, to some extent, their evidence is not given at least, they can't be allowed to record statements. In that background, can a statement of a police officer when they indulge in all these activities can be taken personally and with sufficient to record conviction? That is the question. That is the question. I say this question has not been considered by the Supreme Court in any of the judgment. In Gopal Singh or in the case of Tahir Ali. It is well settled principle that the law should be interpreted to give its legislative intent. The Supreme Court in five judge bench, decision is Nati Devi versus Radha Devi Gupta, observed it is equally well settled that in interpreting a statute, effort should be made to give effect to each and every word used by the legislature. The court always presumed the legislature inserted every part thereof for a purpose, and the legislative intention is that every part of the statute should have that effect. Therefore, the judgment of Tahir Ali, in my opinion, suffers, or Gopal Singh suffers from doctrine of sub silentio. Now, you will find, so far as sub silentio is concerned, there are 2-3 judgments. I will point out. First is the summon itself. Summon itself says the rule that precedent sub silentio is not authoritative goes back at least in 1661 when council said and 100 precedents sub silentio are not material. Tuition J agreed precedents sub silentio and without argument are of no moment. The rule has ever since been followed, but the court before whom the precedent is cited may be reluctant to hold that his predecessor failed to consider a point directly raised in the case before it. And this reluctance will be particularly pronounced if the sub silentio stack is leveled against not one case but a series. In the Samant book, it is also mentioned one of the chief reasons for the doctrine of precedent is that the matter that has come before fully argued and decided should not be allowed to be reopened. And consequently, the decision ought not to be regarded as possessing absolute authority, even if it does not fall within the subside. So this is the view of the Samant jurisprudence, and this view is further accepted by the Supreme Court itself in Arvind Das 2005 SCC 488, and that follows judgment of State of UP versus Synthetic and Chemicals, that is 1991, 4 Supreme Court cases 139. Friends, from the above, in my opinion, the evidence of police officer can't be treated as equal to other officials and they are not entitled for equally to be treated equally as other officials, and there can't be any presumption given to the police officer on the ground that the accused has to establish that why the police officer has involved in false. The presumption can't be given in favor of the police officer. This is the evident value of the police officer, and in this background, they can't be given a presumption. To the organizers for giving me this opportunity and have a patient hearing in this regard. If any question in this regard is there, I'm here to answer as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful webinar. And for the participants, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you for the question. Or you can just send a message on the chat.
Harshit, I have received a few questions. I think we can take them up, and the participants in the meantime can send the questions in the chat box. So the first question that I'm taking up is not very relevant to the subject that we are dealing with, but it is that during this lockdown, during this pandemic, cyber crime has increased multiple folds. We do have cyber cells, we do have police officers dealing with cyber crimes, but since cyber crime includes a technical know-how, do you think the police officers are well equipped to deal with such cases, or we need some specialists, or what?
For the cyber crime, there needs a specialist. Even I as a lawyer operate these computers like this. Similarly, the police officer, they are not expert. And 65B, that is incorporated in other provisions of information technology, they are specifically incorporated in the statute books. And those provisions have to be complied with, and that can be complied with only by the experts. And ultimately, the experts can find out the crime committed. You and me, we can't even find that this what is the way out they have done it, what is the modus operandi that they have adopted to commit the crime.
Right, sir. So the next question is, as you have said, the statement given to police is inadmissible in court of law. Then why is interrogation held or torture is suffered by the person who's taken into custody?
Interrogation is only giving a clue to the police officer. On the basis of that interrogation, the police officer goes and collect evidence in support of it. Sometimes the police, in the confessions, in some of the cases, it is found by the court itself. The confession was given by the accused on account of not because that he has committed the crime, but because of some influence, or sometimes to protect his mother, or sometimes to protect his wife, sometimes to protect his child, and the child want to protect his father. So ultimately that needs interrogation, so that these information which are given by the police during interrogation can be scrutinized, and on that basis evidence can be easily collected by the police. Interrogation is only for use for that purpose. It is not for the purpose of evidence. Right. And in that case, one thing is there, if some evidence is given, then the police officer definitely can take that accused to the magistrate, and the magistrate can record his statement under section 164 CRPC, and then it will become a confession. Ultimately, his interrogation is relevant to that extent.
Right, sir. We have a very interesting question. Although the police officer has a motive of awards and promotion, but still there are some police officers who actually function as per the procedure. Doesn't making their evidence inadmissible as per Evidence Act demotivate such responsible functionaries of the system?
The bad elements are there. And, ultimately, we have to protect Article 20. Article 20 is supposed to be right of silence is there to the accused. The accused is presumed to be innocent from the beginning, unless he is proved guilty. So, to proving guilty, some evidence has to be collected, and this is when these examples. The first law commission report found that in the Britain they are confusing with the law of admissibility of evidence of the police officer, just like in Tata matters now. Even the parliament has permitted the police officer's statement as admissible if it is made before the superintendent of police. So these are the exceptions are made. But ultimately, in a normal rule-making authority, these powers should not be handed over so that they can be misused. We have to remove the possibility of misuse.
Right, sir. So the next question is, Section 165 acts as an extraordinary measure for when the warrant cannot be obtained. However, the police has made the exceptional circumstance as a norm to do away with the requirement of warrants for a seizure altogether. However, the courts have overlooked these procedural lapses. Does this not amount to violation of Article 21?
Article 20, if it is been misused, and you can point out, this is the procedure, this procedure is affecting his right and life and liberty, then it will be hit by Article 20. But for that, we have to establish the facts.
Right, sir, right. Sir, the next question is, what steps are taken by police in case of rape while interrogating different people? As we've also read that while dealing with rape victim, humiliating questions have been asked and she's not been dealt with properly. So if you have any...
I'm not able to understand the question.
Sir, basically the question relates to interrogation by police in a rape case specifically. If you can, in a rape case, if you can, highlight it with one or two of your cases, if you have dealt with such case, because we've constantly been reading that it's not easy to report a rape case, and when a person goes to report that the victim has been harassed by police officers, she's been asked humiliating questions.
So ultimately, the harassment, ultimately you can report to the court.
Right.
So far as that is concerned. But so far as the prosecutor's evidence is concerned, that the weightage has to be given by the police officer. You can't run away with that. The court will insist that you must record the statement of prosecutrix.
Right, sir, right.
I have seen a matter from Rajasthan,
okay,
by the gang rape that way in the hostel, and there were number of persons were there. So ultimately, for 8 years, the statement was not recorded. And she was not coming for giving a statement. And ultimately, she wanted to come and give the statement. The statement was recorded after 8-9 years.
Okay. So this is a practice, sir, which has been going on. So the next question is, as we have seen in almost most of the 406 or 498 cases, the IO generally takes bribe from the accused side to not submit the proofs and to remove them from the file at time of filing charge sheet. Then in that case, what can be done so that the victim gets pure justice?
Actually, there is a misnomer that the police only take bribe from the accused. Sometimes the complainant gives the bribe and it was suitable to them. In most of the bribe giving is taking place on the complainant side, and it is easier for them, it is helpful to them, and they are not afraid of any allegation against them also. Because then they are doing something in favor of the complainant. These are the things that depend on the facts of each case. This is a question which can't be answered one way or the other.
Right, sir. Sir, I think I've tried covering almost all the relevant questions for the session pertaining to the session. If anyone has any other questions, they can message it. Otherwise, thank you so much, sir, for taking out your valuable time. It was a great session. It was a great learning experience. And we have one more question. This will be the last question for the day. It says, as per case of Bhajan Lal, it is duty of every police officer to record FIR, but in order to save themselves from higher authority, they just file an action taken report and ask the victim to leave without any verified document. Is there any provision for the same?
Actually, there were serious allegations coming against the police. They were not registering all the FIR. And in Lalita Kumari's case, Supreme Court has held that you have to register all FIR in an allegation if the allegation is for cognizable offense. But there also, as far as my view is concerned, this is resulting in unnecessary false FIRs also. Today the situation, all FIRs are registered. Once an FIR registered, then one has to go for the police will go for the arrest. As soon as the police will try to arrest the person will go for anticipatory bail. Thereafter, he will go for the bail, and thereafter for the charge. And ultimately, court working time is being consumed in these things, and ultimately finds that the case is completely false because there is no right of defense at that stage. For 10 years, the poor person runs from one court to another court, and every time he has to attend the hearing, he can't even miss one hearing because he is required to. One of the conditions of the bail is that he has to attend the hearing. These are the things. Ultimately, this is not the solution. Solution should be any FIR is made, it should be recognized by Joginder Singh's case. He said you need not register the FIR, right? Need not arrest the accused in every FIR. But our police present a scenario under the pressure also because they are held that they are corrupt. So therefore they say we will file FIR, register FIR. We will arrest the person and we will file the challan. I have seen today itself, I was looking at matter, the challan itself, only FIR is quoted. I mentioned in the court said, what is the challan? Final report. I said the final report contains only the first information report. And they say, and thereafter statement, and then the challan is fine. This is the time.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful session. The link of sir's blog has already been shared in the chat box. I have seen your blog, sir. There is a lot that you've written, and we would like to have you more often on the other topics as well. Thank you so much for taking out the valuable.
I welcome your, and I will take it as a privilege.
Thank you so much, sir. We would love to have you again with us.
I'm thankful to you, and your company for doing all this good job for the students and the lawyers, and we can discuss the things, we can have an interaction with each other. Interaction always gives the knowledge.
Exactly, sir. Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.